Ladies and gentlemen, it's now time for the award to which every young journalist should aspire. The Graham Perkin Award for Australian Journalist of the Year. The Melbourne Press Club is proud to host this annual award to honour one of this country's finest editors in Graham Perkin. As the Australian's media section noted a couple of weeks ago, the Gold Walkley is all very nice, but this award comes with a $20,000 cheque, courtesy of Fairfax. And to present the award, please welcome to the stage, firstly, Greg Hywood, Chief Executive of Fairfax Media, at the quills for the first time in his new role. Hopefully Greg has remembered to bring the cheque with him, Greg. And to announce the winner, please welcome the chair of the judging panel and one of our industry's true champions, a Perkin winner himself, Melbourne Press Club Lifetime Achiever, a former editor of The Age, former editor-in-chief of the Herald and Weekly Times, and a best-selling author of books about our nation's most famous soldiers and horses. Please welcome Les Carline.
Thank you, Peter. This is the 35th year of this award and the second year in which it's been open to journalists from television, radio and the online media. As with last year, we received a long list of entries that could rightly be called outstanding. And as with last year, my fellow judges were Jana Vent and Paul Kelly. We came up with a short list of 4. Jill Baker of the Herald Sun for her first-person account of her battle with cancer. Anthony Clan of The Australian, for his articles exposing flaws in the Building and Education Revolution scheme. Laurie Oakes of the Nine Network, the Herald Sun and the Daily Telegraph. For his coverage of the 2010 election. And Kerry O'Brien of ABC Television for interviews before and during the 2010 federal election. The winner, by unanimous decision, is Laurie Oakes.
I know in this brave new Australia we're all supposed to move forward, but I'm going to disappoint you and look back to the famous meeting in Kevin Rudd's office the night before you became Prime Minister. Can I ask you, is it true that Mr Rudd told you that night that he...
Before you hear from Laurie, the most leaked-to man in Australia, I'll read to you very briefly what the judges had to say. Laurie Oakes last year did something few journalists ever do. He broke 2 stories that not only changed the course of a federal election campaign, but also lingered to its end, and indeed linger to this day. He was, as he so often has been in the past, the classic newsbreaker, an inspiration to journalists everywhere. His exclusive stories for the Nine Network in 2010, the interviews he conducted during the campaign, his columns for the Herald Sun and the Daily Telegraph, and his book On the Record, which appeared just after the election campaign, all these met the defining criteria for this award. And these criteria are that the journalism should be both memorable and excellent. Now, there is a third criteria. We're asked to look for work that Graham Perkin might have liked. Now, Laurie, he doesn't look it, but Laurie's so old he actually knew Graham. And those of us who worked on The Age in the 60s and early 70s know how much Graham admired Laurie's work for the old Sun News pictorial under Harry Gordon. And Graham talked about hiring Laurie, and he even tried to hire him, but he never managed to get the offer quite right. But more than 40 years on, he's remembered you tonight, Laurie. Congratulations to you and to the other three on what we would like to stress was a very strong shortlist. Thank you.
Well, I'm speechless. Well, not quite. I did make a few notes in case. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Les, and thank you, Graham. This is gobsmacking. Although, if I was completely honest, I'd have to say that there is one other award that I would have preferred to have got. I'd really like to be standing here tonight as the Young Journalist of the Year. I hate you, Henrietta. You're just starting out, and you've got a wonderful career ahead of you. I've thought over the years about winning the Perkin Award, but I never expected it to happen. Even when the award was broadened a few years ago to include broadcast journalists, I thought it was too late in my career for me to be in the hunt. And now here I am on April Fool's Day, and it doesn't seem to be a hoax. But the main reason I'm pinching myself, thinking it can't really be happening, is the competition. I look at that short list that Les read out, and Jill Baker's account of her ordeal with breast cancer is one of the most moving things that I've ever read in my life. And the quality of the writing, superb. It's just extraordinary personal journalism. Anthony Clan's series of stories on the Building the Education Revolution stuff-ups was a great example of old-fashioned journalistic digging and perseverance. I think it was brilliant reporting. And Kerry O'Brien, I reckon, had a great year. It might have been his last on the 7:30 report, but in many ways it was his best. And I found myself quoting Kerry's interviews repeatedly in my News Limited columns. So to be frank, I feel that I'm up here sort of under false pretences. But it is an enormous honour to win the Graham Perkin Award. And one reason I value it so highly is because, as Les said, I knew Graham Perkin. Not many people in the business today can say that. It's, 36 years, I think, since he died. So even though having known him means that I'm a bit long in the tooth, it also means that I was very privileged. I never worked for The Age or for Perkin, as Les said, but I used to see him when he came to Canberra to visit the Age Bureau headed by the late Alan Barnes. Barnesy would turn on the grog at the Age house. You know, in those wonderful days, of course, every major newspaper owned a grand house where the head of the bureau lived. And Barnesy would turn on the grog, and Perkin would come along, and a group of us would sit around talking politics, but also talking journalism. Graham Perkin was a bloke who thought deeply about the craft. Years ago, I read an article containing a quote from him that I've always remembered because I agree with it very strongly. I think I might have mentioned it once before at the Quills. Perkin said, "For a journalist, intuitive ability runs first for me, intellectual capacity second, training third." Well, intuitive ability was what Graham Perkin called it. I call it having a nose. I think it's undervalued these days. You can't teach it, and it beats a journalism degree any day, especially in political reporting. Another Perkin quote that sticks in my mind was that he said, in answer to a letter from Ron Walker inviting him to attend a Liberal Party dinner, Perkin wrote back, "As I think you know, I have political beliefs, but absolutely no political alignments." Now, I like that quote because, well, it's expresses the proper attitude for an editor. I think it also expresses the right attitude for a political journalist as well. And Perkin had, of course, been a Canberra-based political journalist himself for a brief period. And Ben Hills confirms in his biography of Perkin, Breaking News, that Perkin's best leak was Billy McMahon. Well, I have to say that didn't exactly make him Robinson Crusoe. But Graham Perkin was one of the true greats of journalism in this country, an example and an inspiration to young journalists, as I was back then, and very generous with advice, even to a young pup from a rival newspaper. It's wonderful that the Perkin legacy is celebrated through this award administered by the Melbourne Press Club. I've said a few things in my time about the National Press Club. I'd like to say about the Melbourne Press Club that it's not a haven for pokey addicts, real estate agents and log rollers. It's all about journalism, and I wish the National Press Club was the same. And the Age deserves praise for continuing to provide the cash prize for the Perkin Award in these straitened times for newspapers. I certainly appreciate it, so thank you, Age. Obviously, it was the fall of Kevin Rudd and the ensuing federal election that made 2010 an extraordinary year for political journalists. It was certainly what got the adrenaline flowing for me, and I felt like a young pup again. When you get to my age, there's a tendency to sort of look back and think that they were the good old days. You'll think about big events like the drowning of Holt, the dismissal, Malcolm Fraser, Bob Hawke taking over the Labor leadership after Malcolm Fraser had been to Government House to call an election. I mean, they were dramatic events, but what last year proved is that political events in this country are just as dramatic and just as exciting now as they always were. There are no good old days, there are good new days as well. And the result of all that turned out to be particularly important for the craft of journalism. It's something I think hasn't been really recognised properly. But as a result of the hung parliament, we got at last shield laws for journalists. For the first time in this country, laws that provide a degree of protection for journalists who abide by their professional ethics and refuse to name confidential sources. So we can all laugh at the new paradigm. We can laugh at the new paradigm and we can poke fun at the independents. But I mention it tonight because it's something we've been fighting for a long time. I've been involved to some extent, some small extent, and it's something that's obviously of particular interest to the Melbourne Press Club because Michael Harvey and Gerard McManus, who paid a heavy price for refusing to divulge a source, were from a Melbourne newspaper. The hung parliament put independent Andrew Wilkie in a pivotal position, and it was Wilkie who introduced the Evidence Amendment Journalist Privilege Act 2011 that was passed by Parliament on the 21st of March. Now, what happens tells you something, I think, about politicians. A couple of years ago, Federal Attorney-General Robert McClelland branded as misguided the New Zealand shield laws that include an assumption in favour of journalist privilege. Well, 11 days ago, that same Robert McClelland, backing Wilkie's bill in the House, proudly declared that it was based on those very same journalistic shield laws across the Tasman. You've got to love them, haven't you? So the hung parliament, the new paradigm, are going to produce a lot more good stories over the next couple of years, I think, and covering it is going to be every bit as exciting as covering the Hawke-Keating era or the Whitlam years. And that's why I love this job and will always love it. There's one other thing I'd like to say tonight very quickly. This is a difficult period for journalism. As technology rapidly changes the way things are done and the search continues for a business model that will enable, or business models I suppose, that will enable quality journalism to survive. But I don't believe that we need to be at all pessimistic about the state of the craft. I took over yesterday as chairman of the Walkley Advisory Board. I trust it's okay to mention the Walkleys in this company. Like the Quills, the Walkleys are an important marker of the state of Australian journalism. The Walkley Foundation exists purely to encourage quality journalism and to raise standards. I stood down from the Walkley judging last year for obvious reasons, but in the years before that, when I've been involved in the judging process, I've been impressed and encouraged by the quality of the work that comes before the judges. And I impressed not only by journalists from the big smoke, but the work that's submitted by journalists in rural and regional newspapers and in radio and television in the country areas. There's wonderful work being done, you realise, when you get into a position like that, at all levels and across all platforms, and I'm sure that the judges of the Quills find that as well. So there's plenty of criticism of journalists and journalism, some of it justified, but I think it's important to have occasions like this tonight where we can acknowledge and celebrate the positives. So to underline that optimistic view, I'd like to conclude with the inspirational words of a former American president, when George W. Bush, who said, "The future will be better tomorrow." I'd like to think that he's right. Thank you very much, and I will cherish this award.